There you go. Got it roughly right. I'm going to close this. Hello. I don't know if you can hear this. I'm using a microphone on an old iPod, iPhone pair of headphones, kind of iPhone pair of headphones type of thing, and I'm just using a clip to clip it to my t-shirt, my usual red t-shirt. So I let a few people join up. 5 already. I do appreciate you joining me. So is the volume clear enough? I'm going to have to read this sideways because, oh no, I should look here. I'm going to have to read this sideways because I'm using Periscope landscape, because I think that's the right thing to do, and because the stand that I've got only really works sideways for this phone, and that makes life easier. So I'm going to look a bit cross-eyed sometimes when I'm looking at what you're writing. Cool. Well, thanks for joining me. Yeah, I haven't been doing as much tweeting as normal about Final Cut Pro 10, but I've still been thinking about it, comparing it with other things. I don't really have much of a plan for what I'm going to do. I just suddenly saw that I was wearing the right colour t-shirt about half an hour ago and thought maybe I could do a bit of broadcasting. So we recently had a thing in LA, which is the first session of Final Cut Pro 10 Exchange. And there's going to be another one in January, and I think the subject's slightly different, which is good, so the same people can go back, but I hope there will be a way to get other people to go along who aren't necessarily completely converted to Final Cut Pro 10. That's on the pro side, and that's in Los Angeles. I guess it's up to the Final Cut Pro 10 community in other parts of the world to justify the big tour coming to them. So the reason, of course, why I did this is because I've got a new product that's out today, which is my first commercial product for Final Cut Pro 10, and the first time I've put something out there for a long time. When I was a kid, I went through a phase in which I put out some books. I was an author of books of computer programs. I was not much of a programmer, but I managed to convert or translate some books from a different computer code, different kind of basic, and created some books in conjunction with some other people called Games for Your BBC Micro, More Games for Your BBC Micro, Games for Your Electron, and Adventure Games for Your BBC Micro. So I did quite well considering I'm not much of a programmer. So yes, those were published by Virgin Books in 1983 or something like that, before most of you were born, I'm sure. I'm a lot. I am a lot older than I look. Couldn't really quite work that out. So anyway, Final Cut Pro 10. What's going to be coming next? I think. Periscope is actually rotated 90 degrees because of the first comment. Thanks, Richard. Richard, thank you for commenting that. So now I can actually read the comments, although of course I won't be looking in the camera quite so much. So today I released my first product for Final Cut Pro 10 since... I'll tell the story again for people who haven't heard it on the podcast. I was playing around with FX script in Final Cut Pro 5 or 6 in 2007, 2008, something like that. I can't remember when. And I was trying to work out how to use it, and then I found a bug in one of the Final Cut Pro generators that was used to do closing credits, because I needed to do some closing credits for a short film. So that was a very good opportunity for me to actually learn how to do the coding of plugins in Final Cut Pro 5 or 6, whichever it was, because I had a specific thing to do. I had to fix a bug. I had to work out what the bug was, and then I fixed it. So because 10 years before I put some plugins up on the internet, I put some stuff up on the internet, and it turns out to get traffic to your site, give people free stuff. So in the 1996, 1997, I'd done some typefaces, designed some typefaces, and I made them available free on the internet. And in those days, what people did with their internet pages is if they didn't have their own content, they linked to free stuff. So Microsoft even linked to my fonts that I did a long, long time ago. So I thought, I've done this plugin that's for Final Cut Pro, whichever version it was. And I put it online, and then a few days later I got comments from people from France and Russia and people not from English-speaking countries, and they very much appreciated this plugin because it fixed a bug which meant that they couldn't use their Final Cut's built-in closing credits plugin. So I like that, and the thing about doing plugins is there's nothing between me and my audience. There's no director, writer, producer, stuff like that. And also when you make them free, there's no actual friction to people using them and buying them. So, thanks Richard for joining me. Now there is something between. The good thing about making them free is the fact that totally on my own terms I can make whatever plugins I want and make them available, and there's not much friction between somebody checking out the plugin, and if they like it they can immediately use it, so people immediately benefit from a new plugin as soon as I create it. So sure, I've got a question here from, I can only just be about to see that. Does my background consist of programming? Well, no, back in 1980, my father and I got my mum a computer as a joke present. I went away to the States, didn't know anything about computers, but my father being a literary agent and I wanted to be a civil engineer, architect of kind of public works like train lines and stuff like that. As a 13-year-old, which is what I wasn't interested in computers at all. But for my mum's birthday, my dad and I got a Sinclair ZX80, and by the time I got back from my holiday, she'd already been through part of the manual and had taught herself a bit of the basic programming language, and it's called BASIC as well as actually being BASIC. And over the years, I picked up a bit of BASIC, and then the BBC had a big computer literacy program in 1982 or 83, and the idea was to make a TV program about how everyone should learn about computers. And in order to do that, they actually created their own computer for people to try with. So I had one of these BBC microcomputers, as they were called in those days, and I was able to understand the difference between the basic programming language of the ZX computers from Sinclair and the ones that came from the BBC. What that meant, I was able to take a book called Getting Started on Your, I don't know, ZX Spectrum or something like that, and I took that book and I translated it to the BBC computer. So if you go to Amazon or something like that, or that kind of stuff, I converted it from ZX Basic to BBC Basic, and sold a couple of thousand copies back in the old days, because and then there's also a few other Games for BBC Micro as a book of stuff like that. But I eventually got into the world of desktop publishing and graphic design in the late 80s, and was involved in kind of introducing, to some extent, desktop publishing to London at least. Lots of graphic designers came and learned from where I was working at, and I used to teach people how to do layout. And then I went from graphic design to conference design, and then to motion graphics, and then from motion graphics to editing. So I come to editing from motion graphics. Yeah, so I was very lucky that I was kind of forced to learn to program. And I always liked the idea of being an editor. I liked the idea of being an editor back in the mid-90s, because before Avid became popular, because I like the idea that the technology of editing in those days would probably take about 2 or 3 days to learn. I mean, how to use a splicer, how to sync stuff. And after that, people actually credited you with being an artist, because editing is not technical necessarily. People say it's the technical Oscars. Hey, they want a technical Oscar for editing, whereas as if editing isn't creative as acting or writing or directing or anything like that. So I think I might start a campaign not to call Oscars or BAFTAs, which is the British Oscars, technical, because they're not technical. No, very few Oscars are actually technical, apart from there's actually a separate set of awards called the Technical Awards, which are a totally separate section to do with actual technology that's awarded to companies for coming up with technology. I, weirdly enough, am now a board member of the Guild of British Film and Television Editors, which is the kind of the equivalent of the American ACE. So, you know, in the ends of movies where it says Alex Gollner, BSc, that means the British Society of Cinematographers, or ASC, American Society of Cinematographers, and ACE would be for editors. And then there's one in the UK called GBTFE, slightly more unwieldy, which is the Guild of British Film and Television Editors. And strangely enough, I'm on the board of that thing. For their sins, they've asked me to kind of help to at least see if I can coordinate some of their online activities, because I pretend to know stuff about Twitter and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm part of the film establishment, and part of that, I think part of what the Guild of British Film and Television Editors also is trying to do is to help people understand that what editing is. It's quite true that even people who make feature films and movies and TV shows aren't that good at understanding what editors contribute. It's quite mysterious. That's quite good editing big experience, because once you're actually quite good at it, they'll keep hiring you. There's no way to tell if somebody's a bad editor unless it's really obvious. You either are bad or good, and after that, it's whether people can get on with you or not. So anyway, Final Cut Pro 10, is it professional? Well, when I was in Amsterdam, I was lucky to talk to the product manager of Final Cut Pro 10 and to the product manager of Motion. And that's the first time I had proper conversation with them, because they were there in the same room at what was, I suppose, the precursor to FCPX Exchange, the thing that happened in Los Angeles a very short time ago. And they're really totally into the professionals. They want the professionals to learn Final Cut Pro 10. So I asked, these people what we could do for them. I think it's probably better if working with Apple that you don't ask them for stuff, but if you ask what you can do for them, then maybe instead of being like a one-down position going, please, can you give me something, and waiting for them to do nothing, instead of like, hey, I'm at your level, but I'm outside in the real world, and maybe I can do some stuff. So the stuff that we can do, and what he said was they really would like people who know how to use Avid and to use Premiere to give Final Cut Pro 10 another look. Because most people think Final Cut Pro 10 hasn't really changed in the last 4 years. Now, of course, a reasonable number of Avid folk and Premiere folk would like there to be tracks. That's what they like to have changed, but that's not going to happen. But it fits into workflows pretty well, and the ecosystem, in other words, the other third-party tools that work with Final Cut Pro 10, is actually, I would say, the best of the three major applications. There's much more activity making Final Cut Pro 10 work with professionals. And the thing is that I think that maybe Apple don't really understand the nature of post-production, the model for post-production, or how to make money out of post-production. Oh, I saw that message, how much do I use Premiere? I hardly use Premiere. ITV and Adobe in the UK kindly offered to put me on a 1-day or a 2-day thing, getting me freshening up with Premiere. So I have used the current version recently. So I got to see it, how it works, introduced to the mask, the tracking mask, which is very good. So the mask is like Final Cut Pro 10, but the tracking is not built in like Final Cut Pro 10. You have to use lock and load for that. So I'd say that Premiere is about as good as you can get, given the 20th century metaphor for editing that Randy Ubilos came up with in 1993. That's about as far as you can run with that, and I think the problem is that Adobe isn't really competing with Apple, because Adobe isn't trying to do what Apple's doing. What Apple is trying to do is change the world. What Adobe is trying to do is add the features people want and grow the market of people who already know how to use their stuff. And as it's the normal way of editing, they'll get quite a lot of people, and the main people they have to watch out for is Blackmagic, because they're crazy. You don't know what Blackmagic are going to do. They may suddenly release a product that competes with you. Tomorrow morning, Blackmagic may release a product that competes with my Final Cut Pro 10 plugins for no particularly good reason, like Fusion plugin for Final Cut Pro 10 or something like that. So, Verdwin, yes, I mentioned animatics in an earlier tweet. The reason why I was thinking about animatics was that previs, I don't really know that much about previs editing. So I was kind of putting it out there. There was a job offer available for a previs editor in London, and they seemed to mention using Avid. The target editor was Avid, and it seemed to me that it was quite odd that previs would use Avid, because I was picturing it's more like animatics. That you're pre-visualizing using animatics or 3D animatics or models from things like Maya and things like that. But it turns out that it isn't really like that, and in practice the workflow, as far as I could tell from Judith Allen, animation editor and animation VFX editor, she said it's about getting all the metadata from your into your workflow and getting it onto the Avid timeline, and that's why previs editors still use Avid, because the productions they're likely to be doing previs for are going to be using Avid. So that's the answer, I guess. So how much percentage of my time do I do? Yeah, essentially, I use Final Cut Pro 10 for 99% of my editing. I just think it's a good idea to not necessarily And instead of saying Premiere is bad or Avid is bad, I just say come over to here and try Final Cut Pro 10, it's good. But also give Premiere credit for its tight integration with After Effects, if you're the kind of person that can handle After Effects. I kind of came from After Effects to Final Cut Pro a long, long time ago. And it took me a long time to even work out how to use motion. So, sorry, I don't know why I talk so fast on these things. I should just slow down. So yeah, today I released my first commercial plugin for Final Cut Pro 10, or for plugin pack, because it's 120 transitions for Final Cut Pro. Because one of the aspects of Final Cut Pro that is the transitions, some of the transitions will be really good if they worked with connected clips, with titles, with logos, with pictures. And some of the transitions do. So that means you can animate things on and off using the transitions that come with Final Cut Pro 10. But there are some catches with that. Sometimes you can't animate things off, sometimes the background clips move. So you're moving something, the background clips move as well, and sometimes you actually have to design the transition sometimes specifically to work with overlays. And that's where my new product that comes out today through FX Factory is designed for overlays, but also works for video clips, kind of main full screen clips. Thanks very much. I appreciate that. So I licensed that piece of music for $20. The main demo that I did, which has kind of it's just music and bouncy stuff. And that's just a piece of music I don't know where I went to. Audio Galaxy or something, I can't remember. And spent $20 on that piece of music, so I can use that in that demo video. And the other demo videos that I've done on my site, I did myself using music from GarageBand. I'd never really used GarageBand before. And after a couple of hours of procrastination, instead of getting on making the video, I actually made some music using GarageBand. And so that's what you'll hear if you go to alex4d.com and check out the other videos. Because I find when I want to find out about a new plugin, I find that the more information I have, the more comfortable I feel. You know, videos showing how it works, demo videos and stuff like that. So that's what I've done. And there's quite a lot to explain. I think there's only one control you kind of need without having to go through the documentation, is to be able to say, hey, I want this animation to animate something in, like on the screen, onto the screen, or animate something off the screen. So you have to change the kind of the transition to in or out. So animate something in, like a title, or animate something out, like another title, or the same title, or something like that. That's the only main control you need, but there's lots of other settings because I just couldn't leave it alone. And like play with stuff, and maybe made it a bit too complicated. I'm finding out for my first commercial plugin to see how it goes and see if it makes sense. And provide updates, see how quick I can provide updates to it and keep on releasing, maybe add a few plugins to it, add a few things. Based on feedback, based on how people use the video or use it in their videos and stuff like that. I was lucky enough that the editor for the pop group The Vamps, called Dean Sherwood, he already has used the plugin on a video for the group The Vamps, which is a British band, indie pop band from the UK. So if you go to YouTube, The Vamps, and you go to their most recent video, if you look at the way they brought the titles on, they used my plugin for that. So I appreciate that. So that's at least 40,000 people who saw that video in the last few days. But if you use the plugin yourself, please tell me. I'd love to link to it and tweet it and show what it can do. So yeah. Any questions about me? Because I'm so interesting. Final Cut Pro, I know a little bit about it. Oh, thanks for buying it. I appreciate that. Yes, so my branding is slightly different from other people. So yes, Chris Fenwick is, everyone was on my case, and it's been many years. Why take so long to make plugins? Psychological problems, I think. The thing about making a commercial plugin is the fact that as soon as you sell it for a certain amount, then the people who bought the plugin want it to work, and I've got to be responsible and to make sure that it works and does what it says it's supposed to do. And that's a bit of a problem, because essentially the thing about a free plugin is like, hey, I think it works. I don't really have the opportunity or want to put the effort into testing it in every single possible scenario, every single possible kind of computer. But because, hey, you get it as is if it's free, because I'm doing it for free and it's worth what you pay for it. So in 2008, Rick Young, writer of Final Cut Pro 10 books, sends me an email and introduces me to Nicholas of Noise Industries, or FX Factory. And Nicholas says, "Oh, when are you going to start doing commercial plugins?" This is 2008 or 2009 or something like that, so a while ago. And over the years, he's just been badgering me and strongly suggesting, when am I going to do it? Have I got any ideas? They're waiting, lots of great ideas and stuff like that. And I just haven't felt... It's not a technical problem necessarily. Initially, he wanted me to make more advanced plugins, the kind of plugins that work Final Cut Pro 10 and also Premiere and After Effects and Motion, Quartz Composer-based plugins. But... yeah, I guess I was just too scared. It's a bit like, asking a girl out or something like that. Or worry what's going to happen, and you don't know why once you've done it. You haven't done it before. So that's the other side of being an editor, is the fact that other people take the risk. Other people make the movie, TV show, put it out there, and they're taking the risk, and all you have to do is your best. And it's them that have to kind of put their ego on the line, like actors do. So yes, it's taken so long because I just haven't been able to do it. And luckily, by my trip to LA and being inspired by the people I met, like Misha Tannenbaum, who does Edit Stock. So Edit Stock is really cool. It's really good for editors who aren't really connected. If you don't have access to footage, you're an editor, but you don't know people who make people who make filmed, but you know the footage maybe won't necessarily cut together very well or isn't good enough necessarily to put in a show reel, then Edit Stock is really useful. It's a site where you can download footage from short films, from adverts, from different kinds of videos, all the source footage, and it's all been arranged and sorted like an assistant editor would. And essentially you can be an editor without having to be an assistant editor, without having to shoot stuff, and it's really useful for practicing editing. So I met Misha Tannenbaum when I was in LA earlier this year as part of my trip to the States, because I went to the Final Cut Pro 10 Creative Summit at the end of June, beginning of July. And Misha was one of the people that inspired me as to how it feels when you get your product, when you get a sale and people actually trust you, and they say, you put something out there and say, would you like this? And then they say yes. And that feeling is the thing that I realized that I should go for. So it's all the people that, as part of the Final Cut Pro 10 community, are people on the... if you don't follow Twitter, which I imagine most of you do, given the fact this is owned by Twitter, this is Periscope, the hashtag FCPX is a very useful hashtag. It's a great little community of people, great links, people retweeting other people, supporting each other, providing useful information when they can. And I've been meeting all those people and realizing that meeting people in person is fantastic. And the great thing also is the fact that once you leave people, when you say goodbye, you're not really having to say too much of a goodbye, because you can always be connected online. So technologies are really good. And for example, on Philip and Greg's Final Cut Pro 10 lunch, I was interviewed for an hour or so in LA, and he asked me, what's the best technological thing that you can think of that's happened in the last 20 years? And I think it's social media in general, and platforms like Facebook and Twitter, because you don't actually have to say goodbye to people. You can control to what extent your friendship and relationship is with people through technology, and parting is not such sweet sorrow, I suppose you could say. So inspired by the people who do stuff like Jason Ortiz as well, and MVFX, Motion VFX, people who put stuff out there and really put it out there and do really good work. Yeah, I got on with it, finally. So yeah, that's terrible. So I've got my first plugin. So for now it costs $39. So the question is, can I make an audio mixing app for Final Cut Pro 10? I have not those skills. Final Cut, as you may have heard me say, or Chris Fenwick's Final Cut Pro 10 Grill, making quick plugins in Final Cut Pro isn't that hard, because you're using a motion graphics program. You're using Apple Motion to do it. If you do the kind of plugins that I've made or made recently, to do real coding, to actually do some real programming, like the kind of stuff that's used in core melt plugins like Lock and Load. Although that programmer is based in the UK. I realised, I met him when I was at IBC in September. That's real programming, and even though I studied that a little bit, I was never any good at it. In fact, I saw myself as a translator. I was able to talk to programmers. I mean, I went to the Apple Developer Conference in 1990, before, again, some of you were born, I'm sure, in 1991, and I was just about able to understand what was going on. Just about. I understood the structure of the way the operating system worked and learned it a bit before. But I think what I thought of myself as was somebody who'd be able to communicate with programmers and translate between their world and the real world, because it doesn't seem to be very important as a programmer. You just say, well, I'll just stick to my programming. I don't want to talk to real people. And I thought, I think I can do both. But I don't know why I'm talking about this. Sorry about that. Anyway, random. So that's it. I'm not a good enough program to do certain features. So the question, what could be in the next Final Cut Pro 10 update? I really have no idea. I kind of don't want to know. I don't necessarily want to be in on the in crowd too much. What I hope the Final Cut Pro 10 update doesn't have is wonderful animated transitions that transition things on and off the screen. That would be irritating. But I'll pick myself up and dust myself and keep on going with my plugins, I suppose, if that happens. What would I hope Apple give more ability for the ecosystem to do more. That's what I hope. I like it so that if you use a menu command, you'll be able to send a Final Cut Pro 10 sequence to another program that's running and let that other program do some interesting stuff, as opposed to having to choose export as an file as an XML and then back in as an XML, and then you get multiple copies and the imported version and stuff like that. I'd like it to be a bit more of a tight link. I mean, that would just mean people be able to solve problems of different kinds of workflow problems. I think I'm not much of a. Let's put it this way. With my work, I have a habit of doing just enough that the client would notice and not spend too much time on things the client wouldn't notice. Which is terrible, really. I don't let my ego get in the way of reducing my hourly rate, because if I spend too long on something that somebody doesn't care about, effectively my hourly rate is going down, because I know the client's not going to be paying for a better color grade than they would notice, or a better sound mix than they would notice. So, don't know if that's a good thing, but that's just what my take is on that. So if I don't want to spend time on... I see that sound... I like the idea of really making roles do more. Deliverables are a problem. I recently tweeted, I think over the weekend, that somebody actually delivered a trailer with the wrong soundtrack on it. It's called The Brothers Grimsby. You'll see on an earlier tweet of mine, in which the actual trailer was released and sent to Deadline or some kind of website, and they put it on YouTube of a video which only had the voices. No audio effects, no sound effects, and no music for a trailer. And if you imagine what a trailer is like with just people's voices only, it's very dry and very flat. Which shows that the problem is, when you've got your trailer done, or your TV show done, or your movie done, there's hundreds now of different kinds of deliverables. And I think Final Cut Pro 10 is best suited and best positioned to really help with that, to make it so that the assistant editors and the various other people producing stuff are able to produce all the multiple versions they need very quickly. Such as Charlie, trailer editor. What is his surname? That's terrible. Oh well. When you get a trailer done, you've got to make it work for lots of different platforms, for Hulu, for YouTube, for Vimeo, different languages, all the different tracks and different music and effects. In the UK, delivering TV programs, you need to have tracks for audio description, because it's quite common to have somebody describe what's happening on screen, so people who with limited eyesight can actually hear a description of what's happening and still enjoy the show with their friends and stuff like that. So that means that actually has to be made during post-production. So I think Final Cut Pro 10 has got the best structure for making that happen, I would say, as far as I can tell, because of roles. Roles are really powerful, especially if the roles are actually delivered as separate QuickTime tracks, and eventually, I would guess, at different resolutions. So you may have a 4K background, but you may have a 2K overlay, or yes. So the question, do I use 3D text? If the client wants 3D text, I kind of do use 3D text a little bit. But it's a bit like seeing closing credits or titles or lower thirds and using Lucida with Final Cut Pro 6 and 7. You can tell the editor didn't really want to do the motion graphics. They just chose the default font, stuck it on there in order to tell the director, okay, you happy now? Can I get on and do the edit? And I think 3D text to some extent is like that. So that's why if you're a Final Cut Pro 10 fan, you're going to recognize 3D text that's done the default 3D text, essentially. So it's the kind of thing that clients, some clients, corporate clients, charity clients, people who just need a video done, they appreciate. They look like, it looks like you've done more work and you've cared more about what's in the video, and it just doesn't look like the video that can make using iMovie or Premiere. And it's really easy to do. So some features are about doing something that adds a lot of value from the client's perspective, but doesn't take you too much time. And especially that's true, I imagine, for editors. If you're an editor and you are a storyteller, and then somebody expects you to do stuff that you didn't really sign up for, i.e. motion graphics, can you make that text look a bit more interesting? That kind of stuff. Whereas you want to say, well, I don't want the text on there at all. I think actually his story is told by having these people say what they need to say. Then effectively you have to do what the client tells you as opposed to what they need. And 3D text is good for that, because then they feel loved or something. So I've used it a little bit, but it's not for me. And the question is, 3D text, not a sign of professional software. I imagine some people would say, hey, that's a sign that Final Cut Pro 10 isn't professionals. Why, instead of doing stuff that we need, like, I don't know, live link to motion and back or stuff, or scrolling timeline, why put 3D text in there? I got a theory. And the good thing about, even though I talk to Apple, they don't tell me anything, which means I can have all the theories I want. As soon as I stop tweeting, as soon as I stop having theories, then I've been told something and I can't tell you about it. The thing is, 3D text is quite a good feature to add if you want to test aspects of the operating system or stuff to do with 3D or stuff. It's a separate little feature that is kind of in its own little box. So once you've got that box working, you don't have to worry. It's not likely to affect something like the way the XML works or the way that the timeline works or the way that sound works. 3D text is a thing in motion, then that part of motion is built into Final Cut Pro 10, and it's a separate bit. It's not like it wasn't hard to program, but it's more, I get the impression that maybe to some extent it's to help, maybe, who knows, the operating system itself, to make sure that they've got their graphics drivers working better, or to do more advanced stuff, or to make the demos work good. I mean, the demo that they gave at the Final Cut Pro 10 Summit in late June at Apple, and also the one in Amsterdam, and I imagine the one they got from Los Angeles, they included a bit of the 3D type. And that's not for the editors in the room, but maybe for the producers in the room. If you're a producer or a director, and you hear that that Final Cut Pro 10 built-in generators or title generators were actually used to do the titles for a major Hollywood feature film, you kind of think, good. I mean, the interesting thing about, compare two case studies. Well, one case study which is Premiere or After Effects being used to make, / After Effects being used to edit one of the coolest films that was out last year or the year before, which was Gone Girl. So that's a great case study for Adobe. And David Fincher and stuff like that. Whereas then you've got Focus, not a big film, did okay, but it was released at the right time, let's put it that way. Not too much competition, so it probably made its money back. And it was kind of edited by the editor and the directors, kind of. And it was just, Mike Matzdorf's PDF book is the book to get, so iBook, about how that was all done and what tools they used. And I'm very proud to say that one of my plugins were used a little bit in the turnovers for sound and VFX. There's two case studies. One case study is about the way Hollywood has been quite a lot recently. In other words, you've got a director who's got lots of power, can do what they want, and they can add whatever features they like and make things very expensive and do hundreds of takes and do composite shots combining stuff together, which is a really good demo of what After Effects combining stuff together and getting tracking and having those compositions go into Premiere. So that's a good demo, and it's good that's one kind of modern filmmaking. But the other kind of modern filmmaking that maybe producers like a little bit more, or maybe studios like a little bit more, is the fact that directors and editors and folk can do the post-production of movie like Focus, kind of mid-sized to small mainstream movie, using on MacBook Pros, and it can be done on the plane, and it can be done by a small number of people. There's not a huge infrastructure as something like a major motion picture. So that's good news. And also the Emilia Clarke movie that's coming out soon. I always want to call it Song from the Stone or Song of the Stone or something like that. Anyway, coming soon. So I'll talk about round trip in a minute. All I can do is make guesses. So Song from the Stone is a good demo because it's like a small indie movie that I guess they're probably talking about now. So Emilia Clarke. Anyway, go to IMDb. Emilia Clarke, who's in Game of Thrones, she's the lead in this kind of water set thing, studio-ish feature film edited in Final Cut Pro 10. The good news about that is it's all doable. Because Avid, at the moment, on their blogs and also in their shareholder talks, they're saying they want to go for Tier 2 and Tier 3 editors. They're looking for small indie productions and students and people making small things. That's what they're trying to market for, Avid Media Composer to, and that's what their case studies are more about. So that's why there's more likely to be a Ex Machina case study from earlier this year than there is to be like as well as in the Avengers movie or something like that. Of course, nearly everything's edited in Avid, so the question is which media composer things appear on the blog and who else are they trying to appeal to. And the question is, the problem with the reason why Avid editors really like Avid, and I think that's a really cool feature, totally understandable, is if you're an Avid editor working on a feature film, you just walk up to your computer, and there on the screen are all the bins full of all the footage that you want to use. Everything's sorted out, including takes, and all the multi-clips are all sorted out, and you can get on and edit. Avid is easy to use because it's got the infrastructure of lots of assistant editors having to go through, do lots and lots of work that editors don't actually have to hear about. That's what makes Avid really easy to use, because of the infrastructure around it. But what if the infrastructure you can't afford the infrastructure anymore? That's why I hope that Apple kind of go after assistant editors. Assistant editors are the people to persuade to use Avid. And I think the pitch is if you use Final Cut Pro 10, you're doing less of the stuff that you have to do with Avid, and that means you get the chance to do some new skills, stuff that is also useful to use, like VFX editing and liaising with effects companies, and being in the more meetings organising VFX and organising the shoot and stuff like that. So you, as an assistant editor, you get more embedded and tightly in with the meetings and the versioning and the stuff associated with making the film, as opposed to having to do lots of stuff to do with encoding or stuff that Avid requires in order to get it to a good state, so the Avid editor can actually edit. So I hope that Apple try and get assistant editors to take a look at Final Cut Pro 10. And now's the time to make plans for NAB. Yes, despite the fact that less than 1% of editors are working on high-end TV and feature films, for some reason Apple are still interested. I think they think that normal editors would think it's a good idea if they're using the same bit of software that's being used to edit a Will Smith movie. But they only really need 2 or 3 jobs a year to do that. Good examples that can be pointed out, but let's say compare that with Microsoft PowerPoint. Microsoft PowerPoint became popular in a little battle in the mid to late 80s, which was a battle between Adobe Aldus Persuasion, Cricut Presents, and various bits of presentation software. Presentation software was kind of invented. It was kind of both the thing that actually made slides and also could be used to show slides or show presentations about 1986, 1987. And Microsoft was just making one of them. I don't think Microsoft ever marketed PowerPoint as being a really cool piece of software to use because big important business people used it. Like, the head of a multinational corporation used PowerPoint. That's why it would be really cool for you to use. That wasn't really part of the pitch. It was really the pitch was, you know how you have to write reports and they've got thousands and thousands of words in them and you have to structure them properly? Wow them with a presentation. Just make 20 or 30 slides, put some pictures up, get some clip art, put a few words there, structure your thoughts by moving the slides around. That means you get a report and people have seen a nice little slideshow. So the actual presentation itself and the program itself was actually enough to market it to people in the real world. And that may apply to video making too, because YouTubers seem to like Final Cut Pro 10. Anyway, I'm being pontificating. Round tripping. I think round tripping. Is the Emilia Clarke movie called Me Before You Know? I think it's called Song of the Stone or Song from the Stone or something like that. I'm now going to look on IMDb, which I think is the Internet Movie Database. imdb.com. I asked Apple if it was okay to make this public. I think they've kind of made it semi-public that this is happening. But it's this Emilia Clarke. Emilia Clarke, actress in the Game of Thrones. And she's coming soon in a film called Voice from the Stone in post-production now. The post-production team actually, amazingly enough, got in touch with me because they needed a slightly different version of my plugin that has frame counters on it. Still feet and frames required. ILM, the sound part. No, what's it called? What's the sound part? Skywalker Sound. Skywalker Sound wanted to have the footage with a feet and frame timecode on screen. And my plugin only did 23.98 frames per second, and they were doing this production at exactly 24 frames a second for some reason, probably for European distribution, make it a bit easier, I suppose, to have it at 24 as opposed to 23.976. So they got in touch and they said, yeah, we're doing turnovers from Final Cut Pro 10. And we want to be able to send the footage and video time-coded previews to Skywalker Sound because they were doing the sound mix of this Emilia Clarke movie. I always forget the name. I've already forgotten it. Anyway, round tripping. The thing about round tripping, especially for motion and motion graphics, is I don't know. I mean, one part of me thinks don't let people use motion because that's track-based, kind of. Don't let people move part of their timeline over to a track-based editor, because really then people will just move over there and use it as for track-based. That's one possible thing to do. Another thing is it's maybe like cut and paste. I don't know if your iPhone couldn't do copy, cut and paste for 2 or 3 years because they had to wait. Why wait? Why didn't they actually do it when it came out? Because the answer is they couldn't work out a way of doing it properly. They couldn't get the UI to work properly the way they wanted. Maybe it's to do with that. Maybe it's because it's not worth the kind of people in the Final Cut Pro 10 bubble, the hashtag FCPX bubble. They're the kind of people who like motion graphics software. They like motion, and they signed up to be a total video maker. But it may be that Apple know that only 1% or 5% of people want to do a motion kind of round tripping. And it's more important to spend stuff on something else. I don't know. It's a mystery. It's a bit like they don't want to be able to collapse or convert multicam clips to before export. And my guess about that is, if you ask somebody from Apple, well, I got this multicam clip, I want to finalize it because I want to get it into Resolve, I want to send out an AAF or something like that. Apple's response isn't like, oh, well, we can't talk about unannounced products. They may do, get into a conversation with them. He says, well, why do you want to finalize it? I think what they want to do is make it so that the file format of Final Cut Pro 10 itself and the XML and the way that it exports is such that the thing that imports that XML is able to deal with a multicam clip, work with it in whatever way you want. I think my guess is that it seems to be a philosophical thing about not finalizing stuff because they know the nature of real production, say music videos or concert videos or things with multicam things, is the fact that even though you may say finalize, you actually sometimes can't finalize it and you have to change your mind. So maybe they're trying to deal with a kind of, there's no such thing as picture lock world that we're in, and there's only picture latch. We'd like to unlock it later. I don't know. It's a real mystery. I think sometimes instead of saying to Apple, I want a feature, I want this feature, why can't I make it so I can control click something and use it in motion? What works for them, I think, and so they can understand, is they want a story. They want you to tell a story about a recent project in which that would have been really useful and what the advantage would have been to have a certain feature. And I think it's also really useful if you come up with a user interface for it. Like, where would it go? In such a way that it doesn't mess up with the other aspects of the user interface that other people are much more used to. Because it's all very well saying one thing, but in practice, say for example, my idea of round tripping to motion would be that if you control click on a audition, and next make sequences auditions as well. So a sequence itself could be an audition. So a different editor could be working on one aspect or the one audition of a connected story, and another editor could work on another edit of the connected story, and then the main editor would be able to choose between those two different auditions of that connected story. Then you might want to select a sequence of clips and say, okay, center motion, and as audition, choice as an audition. So then you can work away in motion. When you come back, you've actually got the original clips and also the processed clips as done in an audition or something in motion. And then what the UI would look like. So sometimes we've got 7 clips that we've sent, and sometimes we've got that one clip that's come back as a QuickTime of. Or to get motion to send back all those clips individually. Depends how they interact with each other, and whether you want the motion, instead of actually what you come back from motion, to be live instead of actually a clip. What if motion has actually got some settings in it itself, like some filters or some behaviors, and you want to keep those alive? So that means those things have to be able to survive a round trip from motion to Final Cut Pro and back again. Because round tripping is not just round tripping one way. I don't know, because the thing is, I think that Apple, my guess is they don't like the idea of render in place necessarily. I mean, that's the Adobe way, and it's very useful if you're doing After Effects to Premiere, but maybe doesn't feel very 21st century, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just going to stop for a little bit or talk randomly a little bit unless there's more questions or stuff like that. It's been 45 minutes of blather. What kind of personal equipment do I use to shoot video pictures? Well, I got I didn't actually have this as a prop. It just happens to be on my table, which is Canon 5D Mark II. And I use that for doing interviews or doing kind of beauty shots of things that are supposed to look lovely and beautiful. So I use that. Although as an editor, I have to work with this terrible cameraman, me. So I'd rather not. I don't really like the concept of videography. I mean, essentially, videographers are either bad, shouldn't say bad, editors who have to shoot, or shooters who have to edit. Let's put it that way. The whole point of making films is, I would say, collaboration, really. Certainly when it comes to editing. If they're any more advanced in shooting, because they are pretty different. We chose to be editors, or they chose to be shooters. So, Canon 5D Mark II. I'm really lucky. I'm not much of a kit hound. I don't keep on updating. I'm not addicted to getting a new thing. So I use other people's kit when I work with them, when I'm on location and stuff like that. So Canon, Sony, FS, whatever the other people have, then I sometimes am working with that. Either taking the footage off them or sometimes working with it if absolutely necessary. So yes, I'm not Nikon or Canon, I'm not Sony or JVC or whatever editor. So I'm lucky enough, sometimes clients say, could you work on this? And I say, could you shoot and edit it? And I go, well, can I just edit it? And they go, okay, well, I'll hire somebody to do the shooting. And go, great. So yeah, that's the answer to that question. So yeah, I kind of started this broadcast because I got this new plugin pack out from FX Factory called Alex 4D Animation Transitions. And yeah, it's a set of 120 transitions. Do I see Mac Pros around me? In general, the computers, no, because usually I'm going on location and I don't usually work with bits quite so much, so I'm much more likely to see iMacs, the top end for iMacs and fully kitted out MacBook Pros. So essentially that's what because I'm going from the UK to Dubai, or I'm going from the UK to Boston or something like that, and if we take our kit, we don't I suppose Mac Pros aren't too bad, really. But sometimes I'm working on a job, it's not my responsibility, so it usually ends up being an iMac. So I suppose an iMac is a bit, well, I think the ego of some people is they like to have, I don't feel too, I'm not really bothered by Retina displays. My 4-year-old 27-inch iMac is pretty good for me, and it's also really good for developing plugins on, so I don't make the plugins too slow to work on old machines. So I know that the plugins work for me. The Final Cut Pro 10, the current version, but it'll run on a computer that I got from 4 years ago. So, damn, I can't get myself a wonderful new iMac or new Mac Pro. Although, I imagine there's going to be new Mac Pros out. Thunderbolt 3, USB, probably 2 different kinds of USB port, I would guess. What else? Nicer available in different colours. Or the actual computer itself could actually have a colour that you could that changed. It was controlled by the computer. That would be quite nice. So you could actually get information off it. That would be throbbing and saying "render done" or something like that. So, yeah, iMacs. My friend got an iMac because it was the right thing to get to replace the old computer she had because she wasn't going out and about quite so much and doing lots of editing in one location. But Macs are nice and boring. They're usually pretty well powered to do what they do. Yeah, so that's my answer. I don't see that many Mac Pros around me when you talk about computers. As in terms of Apple professionals, what is a professional? So yes, go to alex4d.com to find out about my free plugins. There's quite a lot there, and links to my old plugins. There's about 50 of those. And there's one new pack of plugins which came out today, and I'm very grateful to the people who have bought it so far. If you do use the plugins, I will. Yeah, please tell if you've got any videos that you've uploaded online and you've got it on YouTube or Vimeo, stuff like that. I'd love to see what you're doing with them. Dean Sherwood, who's the person who makes videos for the Vamps, Dean Sherwood, who featured an FCP10 grill, has already tried out the plugin kindly and has been using it. So that's been used in a video already. So, yeah, send me links and I'll tweet links to your videos using my plugins, of course. Why wouldn't I? I need to show what you can do with it. And I hope for a range from all the way from TV, movies, right all the way up to YouTube videos. Depends on how you look at it. Yeah. Also, looking forward to seeing what features people would like, new aspects of the animation plugins and stuff like that. So I really appreciate you 9 people sticking with me. I guess it's not the same 9 people because even I am feeling this has taken a long time, and it's been me doing it. But I might as well go for another 6 minutes. Might make this a regular thing. So the question is, what about metal? Well, so metal is a way of abstracting up to a point and also to get programming closer to the metal. And I think 3D text in Final Cut Pro 10/motion, same thing, was partially about making sure that metal works using a real app and a real good demo. Because metal's really fast and 3D text is weirdly fast, especially using environment maps and moving the environment maps around, and it seems to work perfectly fine on my 4-year-old iMac. So I think that 3D text is partially about as a metal case study, if you see what I mean. Certainly means good news for Final Cut Pro 10 working on the iMac Pro. Sorry, try that again. iPad Pro, if they ever do. In practice, I think it'd be interesting to work out what will go into iMovie, how much more you can do with iMovie to not make it to Final Cut Pro 10 Lite. Of course, that's always been the accusation of Final Cut Pro 10 is iMovie Pro, and calling something iMovie Pro is actually really good. If you think about the millions and millions of people who got free access to iMovie, that's the deep bad news for Adobe, is the fact that Adobe Premiere Clip is great. Premiere Clip, it's free, get 7 or 8 clips, take a video, put them all together, add effects, do stuff. Premiere Clip, free from Adobe on your iPad or iPhone. And then that will export a timeline which you can use in Premiere. I think it'll be, and I got an interesting tweet back from the Premiere Clip folk, the product people, saying, wouldn't it be interesting if it went the other way around? Imagine if you're in Premiere, get 7 or 8 clips, and use the Creative Cloud, and you put those 7 or 8 clips into a timeline, and then somebody with Premiere Clip can have a look at them, can comment on them maybe. Useful for clients, for, offloading some of the work that you don't want to do as an editor onto people that sometimes you want to. Production people need to be made busy so they don't bother you with their changes, and you give them, hey, if you want to do the subtitles, that'd be great. So Premiere Clip, good, but the thing about iMovie is that there's millions of new copies of it being made available for free for people who get iPhones all the time, and that's very interesting in terms of educating millions of people about when they want to try their first timeline. It's not going to be, you can have tracks on it. It's going to be the magnetic timeline. And so iMovie for iOS and iMovie for OS X actually being finally unified just a couple of months ago. It's very interesting news. It means people can do useful work on iMovie on location, on set, or checking footage, dit work, something like that. And it's certainly good for helping people who want to move up from doing iMovie for their personal videos to iMovie on the Mac to Final Cut Pro X on the Mac. So. So, any questions for the last 4 minutes of my Final Cut Pro X chat? Don't know if I can do this every week, but I might do it every once in a while, especially if there's an interest in it. But it's not that I don't appreciate you staying all this time. I do. Thank you. I got hearts, which I suppose is stars and stuff like that. There was an announcement today on Twitter that they've changed the star symbol for favoriting to the heart symbol. I think they're trying to promote and market the Premiere. Let's try that again. What's this thing called? Periscope. That's it. Yeah. So, Final Cut Pro X, I think Final Cut Pro X team are into doing pro stuff. They feel cool doing pro stuff, TV shows, movies, that kind of thing, news, fast news. But the wider Apple may not see that as what Apple is about. So I think it's also important that Final Cut Pro X and iMovie Final Cut Pro X, which eventually, like Motion, will all be one big thing, one big wodge of code, that it also, that those people, that team, are in a good position within Apple itself. Now, the good thing about iMovie Final Cut Pro being be able to interoperate with iMovie on the iPhone means that if Apple's the iPhone company, then Apple like the department that makes video apps. If Apple like the department that makes video apps, that's good news for people who like Final Cut Pro X and iMovie. So yeah, I think, I don't know what I'm saying. Yes, this is not very interactive, I apologise, it's just me going on and on and on. But as you can probably gather, I can go on and on. Wait a minute, I'm just going to do something. Sorry about the click. This is the T-shirt I actually happened to put on today, because I wasn't sure if the product was going to come out today. Underneath the red all along has been FX Factory. So, excuse me. I'm using an old pair of earphones I would never use because my ears don't fit them as a microphone. That's what I've been doing. That's why the sound quality has been so, I imagine, so luscious and lovely. Anyway, a little tip for people who have to make videos like that. So yes, I got this FX Factory thing in Amsterdam when I was helping demo my plugins to people as a kind of preview at IBC. So FX Factory is essentially like the App Store, like the Apple's App Store for plugins. But the advantage is, unlike the App Store for Final Cut for iOS and for the Mac, is that you can try out the plugins. And what's really cool is if I produce a new version of the plugins, the new version will work, but also the old version will work. What? I've got to say I've got an animation plugin that actually moves something on like this. and goes off the end like that. If I want to add a new feature to it, don't have to give it a new name, I just give it a different version number. And the cool thing about FX Factory is the old timelines will still use the old version that does this, but new timelines will be able to use the new plugin with exactly the same name, and I'll have new features, which I think is a really good feature that not many people know about. So, FX Factory. And also, Copy protects it, which is good news for me, and also they sort out the cache and stuff like that. Sharing what split they get, what split I get, and I don't have to deal with things like people deciding to change their mind with their credit card and stuff like that. But don't change your mind, it's really good. Please. So go to alex4d.com to see my new plugins and to see my free old plugins, and also alex4d.com/notes to see my blog, which I haven't been updating recently because I'm not quite sure in which direction I want to go, what I want to talk about for a while. So I'm thinking about that, which is also available in its rather old state on Apple News if you've got the new version of the operating system on your phone. Anyway, it's been an hour. If I don't stop now, I'll keep on going on forever. So I do appreciate you staying with me. Final Cut Pro 10, I think it has some sort of future. Thank you very much. And wow, I guess, hello, this is a morning broadcast from people in Hawaii. I'm coming to Hawaii in April for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks or something like that for a job. Lucky me. And then after that, NAB. Bit of a clue. So you heard it here first. If there's no other questions, I'll say goodbye. Cool. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining me. And if you didn't find it too painful or something like that, I might do it again. Because I'm always thinking about this stuff. I can't help it. Okay, bye now. What does this button do? Swipe down to stop. Stop broadcast. Bye-bye.